I'm pretty tired today, so I almost didn't make a video, but I wanted to go ahead and talk about two series that one of them I really enjoyed, and the other one I'm really excited for, and I would like to share that with you. They're going to be about Versailles, the series that just finished its third and final season. And the other one is going to be about Catherine the Great, which is going to be a 4-part miniseries that will be on HBO here in the United States. And I believe it's Sky. I think it's a channel called Sky in the UK. The reason why I wanted to talk about these is I tend to be a sucker for historical fiction. I find it to be interesting. I also like learning historical facts about the people and different monarchies and situations and wars and people and guilds and businesses and things and church practices, especially in Europe. But I also like the fiction part because it's one of the ways that we're given that kind of media to consume as a consumer of entertainment here in the world, and a lot of what I do read about is fairly Eurocentric, I will admit. I'm trying to get better about learning more about different countries' histories, whether it's like India, China, and then Japan. But also, it's so weird too, like I hate talking about countries as far as like all of them because the borders have changed so much and all the names have changed over the centuries, and in some cases, a lot of cases, millennia, right? As people have occupied different areas, that it's weird because it's like when you say China today, right? The People's Republic of China. It wasn't always together as China, and in a much shorter time span, as far as I'm aware. In countries like, in Europe, like Italy and Germany, they weren't always all together either, right? So and then you have all the empires and different things that rose and fell all over the world, right? So I'm here to talk about some, Eurocentric historical fiction series. One of them is just, it's been a joy to watch. Versailles, I'm going to miss that show so much. If you haven't heard about it, or kind of like, Kelly, what are you talking about? I know that Versailles is a palace in France, and what does that have to do with anything? Well, it has to do with monarchy, right? It has to do with King Louis the 14th. There's so many Louis, I'm hoping I'm referencing the right one. The Sun King. The Sun King, yes, like the sun, like in the sky. The Sun King is also his name, is kind of like a nickname. And his motif, like, just everywhere. The sun is a it's a symbol used to represent him in a lot of his stuff. That's about his dream to build Versailles, that great palace, right? That you've probably heard of, and it's 3 seasons of from absolutely just beginning to seize power, all the way through the completion of Versailles, all the way through all of the drama that he has to deal with as a monarch, and his relationships. Actually, I'm not going to get into spoiler territory, but his different interpersonal relationships, along with the relationships of people in his court, and that includes people like his brother Philippe and his lover and his wives. And just actually, there's a great interplay finally with the people of Paris in the 3rd season, especially, that I really appreciated and I thought was really interesting, and unfortunately kind of I'm not gonna say it's as bad as it was back then, but it's kind of like reminiscent of some of the continued economic systemic woes that people still have today. In a number of countries, I'd argue probably every country at some level. But anyway, that's been great. Like, there's so many layers to it. Like I said, it's this great kind of like, it's drama. Okay, it's historical fiction, but it's drama in a lot of ways. So if you're not interested in that, you may not enjoy it as much. I know here in the United States, Versailles was, I'm pretty sure it was censored on Ovation TV because there were sex scenes and things, and my country, the US, we're like ridiculous. We're like, oh, it's fine if, you know, we have 800 crime shows and true crime shows that show horrific things fictionally happening to people and people playing things that people's heads get blown off. But oh my gosh, sex, that's like, oh, it's like a natural thing. That we can't have that. I mean, I'm not going to get into the whole argument of whether or not people are violent and that's natural, because that's a terrible place to go. But I also think, like, you know, there's something to be said for my country being like, oh, this other stuff's okay, but that's not. And I'm like, really? So my own comments about our weird quirks as a country aside, Versailles is great. It is uncensored on Netflix here in the United States, so you know, you've been warned if you watch it and there's sex scenes, it's there. I know a lot of people are like, yeah, I don't give a shit about that, but some people do, and I'm just putting it there because I want to acknowledge that even though I kind of don't get it, that's still a thing for some people. So Versailles is fantastic. If you like anything about France or interested in French history, it's definitely not a documentary series, but it's also an incredibly interesting ride with I feel like very well written scenes, and just a beautiful sets, beautiful costumes, and honestly some CGI that's pretty darn good for like what the landscape could have looked like back then, along with and by that I mean like the town and, you know, like everything, the buildings a lot of times are CGI, right? Because Versailles has stuff around it now, and has for a long time actually. So that's really cool. I really love it. If you again, I'm not that well versed in French history, so if I could follow it, because it gets really complicated. French history does. If I can follow it, you can follow it. As far as it being a landmark kind of moment, at least here in the United States, for gay content, I'd say that was pretty neat. I appreciated that. A lot of my friends, and including myself, are in the GLBTIQA plus community, our alphabet soup of awesome. So yeah, that was great. And there's actually a YouTube videos interview that I wish if I find it, I'll post it down below. There was a great interview with some of the actors about the third and final season of Versailles, and it talked about normalizing, you know, like gay couples or homosexual couples in media, and following the relationship of Philippe and his lovers. So I want to say his last name, but I'm afraid I'm going to mispronounce it, so I'm not going to. That was great. I don't think they censored that on Ovation, but I kind of lost my access to Ovation channel, so I don't know. I don't think they would, though, because Ovation is like an arts channel here in the United States. It's very heavily arts focused, so I kind of doubt that they did. If they did, I would be super surprised and pretty disappointed. The second thing I want to talk about is the Catherine the Great miniseries, again, a 4-part miniseries that is going to be on HBO here in the United States, and again, Sky Channel, I think in the UK. Pictures. So Origin Pictures website said that it's between like Origin Pictures and New Pictures. And so in case any of you are not in the US or in Canada or any of that, it's also going to be put on, it's going to be distributed not only in the UK and Ireland, but it's also going to be on Sky Atlantic. This is Origin Pictures website saying this, Sky Atlantic in Italy, Germany, Austria, and Spain. So in case you are interested in the Catherine the Great miniseries, again, it will eventually be available not only in the United States and the UK and Ireland, but also through Sky Atlantic, Italy, Germany, Austria, and Spain. Okay? So why am I so excited about Catherine the Great? Why am I interested in it? I don't know. Why am I interested in any Imperial Russian history? It's a very difficult question for me to answer. Since I was younger, I've always been pretty interested in Russian history. What imperial or not, right? Even their communist era history has been interesting because it's the challenges that that country and the peoples have had to deal with, as far as just the sheer magnitude of how large an area that is, that falls under the category of being Russian, that's astounding. And quite frankly, it's a unique situation. So I do find Russian history to be just different and interesting. So when I heard that Catherine the Great was actually going to get a miniseries, even just like I would have been happy it'd been like a small movie, but like a miniseries with 4 parts made me super happy, because she's a really interesting figure. And not just Russian history, and specifically Imperial Russian history, or it's just world history. She's interesting because how she got to power is one thing. Okay, there's a lot of intrigue there, but just she's German, right? It's like a lot of the different monarchs a lot of times weren't always from the country that they ended up ruling, right? And she ended up marrying into the Romanov family, and that whole situation, how she got into power, how she maintained her grip on power, is all actually covered pretty well. If you're interested in watching the Catherine the Great miniseries on HBO, I want to recommend. I know it's available here in the States, but I don't know if it is elsewhere. A 3-part documentary series. I think each part's like roughly 55, 56 minutes each, which is called, Empire of the Tsars. And it's on Netflix. And it's, Tsar is spelled in the Tsars way, Empire of the Tsars, okay? Not the CZ, not the T, anyway, yeah. So it's Tsars if you're looking for it on Netflix, Empire of the Tsars. And the reason why I bring that up is because I had to look again, but the second episode of that documentary series focuses heavily on Catherine the Great. So if you'd like kind of a background historical primer on it, go watch it. It's hosted with Lucy Worsley, and it's well done. I enjoyed the entire 3 parts of the documentary series. I've also read a book, which was Catherine the Great, Portrait of a Woman by Robert K. Massie, and that's really pretty darn good too, but it's a big book, and I don't expect you to sit down and read 300 plus pages, okay? But just know that that is also a pretty good book that's available in English for the Catherine the Great series for a number of reasons. Not only because she was one of the more prominent examples of a monarch, right, that was female, but because she was also very well read. She actually, because of her, inoculation. So inoculation became something, to smallpox. She actually volunteered herself, her son, and some of her court members to be inoculated. And that was cutting edge science at the time. And she decided she wanted to go ahead and put her life and her son's life and some of the courtiers' lives on the line to test that out. So she was a woman who was well read and understood a lot of Enlightenment, specifically French Enlightenment thought. And that was covered not only in the documentary on Netflix, but also in Massie's book about her. In fact, she was very serious about learning how to speak Russian and all that, because again, she was German, right? And because she understood that if you don't speak the language of the people, and this is the funny part, is that the language of the court in Russia was French, right? So she didn't technically need to learn Russian, but she did. And I find that to be fascinating. And again, the documentary will talk more about, the Empire of the Tsars documentary will talk more about how she maybe had become kind of close to thinking about changing how the monarchy worked versus the people's representation and in it and all of that, and the aristocracy and rearranging things. But then the French Revolution happened and it kind of freaked her out. So it was really sad. And actually later on down the road, I feel like that whole decision, which was made for a number of reasons, that whole decision that started, I feel like, with her and went to her son, was something that probably later on ended up causing Russia to meet that inevitable conclusion of revolution themselves for a variety of their own reasons, right? Because she didn't end serfdom. You know, people think that serfdom is like a thing that only existed in like feudal Europe, and I'm like, you know, no, that was still going on in Russia. So, and also my family, which is Polish, which is much later when they left Poland, that was like in the early 1900s. You know, people there, I mean, when you're under Russian rule, even when they came to the United States, we still have it. It's the document that states that you have to renounce your allegiance to, you know, Tsar Nicholas II, the Tsar of all the Russias, okay? So, it's sad because I do feel like, I don't know if they're going to approach that in the documentary or not, whether or not those decisions would eventually lead to the other, but it'll be interesting to see if they do or not. She's also fascinating, again, from a empowerment standpoint, if you're talking about women and being able to, quite frankly, indulge in a lot of sexual activity as freely as men, which I personally believe went on in a number of different courts and places, but I mean, she was an empress and she was doing that, right? She was Tsarina. Actually. A lot of media here in the States that is kind of not just... Queen of, you know, of England, so like Elizabeth I, right? You know, monarchs that are women. So I ones that come to mind for me are Queen Christina of Sweden, right? And then I believe it'd be Empress Maria Theresa of the Austro-Hungarian Empire of the House of Habsburgs, right? And then Catherine the Great, Tsarina of Russia, right? We don't get those stories here. And that's rather unfortunate. So I hope that this may set the stage for that becoming a more normalized thing in pop culture, for people to start to explore women who were monarchs, and not just in Europe. That would be a fantastic thing that I would greatly look forward to. I have just started watching, I think it's Lorenzo the Magnificent, right? The Medici. So far I like it. I was a little jarred by the first episode because the characters, of course, are completely different, as they should be, but the tone is quite a bit different, I feel, from the original Masters of Florence series. And these are both Netflix series about the Medici family in Florence and in Renaissance, pre-Renaissance and Renaissance Italy. So, yeah, it's more like the cusp of the Renaissance and then in the Renaissance. So... it's growing on me. I like it. By the time I got to like the second or third episode, I do recommend watching that if you're interested in Renaissance history. That one actually is, I believe they actually shot some of that in in Florence, in their residence, the former residence of the Medici family, or I don't know if they still have any living relatives. I have no idea. But yeah, that's another series that I'm enjoying right now that's historical fiction. Originally it was Masters of Florence, Medici Masters of Florence, I watched a few years ago, and right now I'm starting to watch Lorenzo the Magnificent, okay? So those three series, if you're interested at all in French, Russian, or Italian history, I highly encourage you to go watch them. And until then, take care of yourself as you're able, okay?